So when I was but a young lad in eighth grade to be exact, I was just getting ready to leave middle school. I decided that I wanted to go to the NBA. I decided that I wanted to be a professional basketball player. And so I started playing basketball a whole lot. Obviously, I'm playing basketball with my friends, and everybody wants to be, a pro basketball player at that age. So uh, there was a lot of people to play with, and I noticed that I was one of the worst players, right? I noticed very early on that I wasn't really that good at basketball, even though I had just started playing seriously. It seemed like I would take I would spend so much time practicing, so I practiced a lot, but then my friends would just come over and destroy me. My brother literally used to beat one of my homies and me 2v1. And granted he was a lot bigger than us at the time, but I still feel like that's like unacceptable, man. Like if you're losing 2v1, you're trash. So, or that person is just that much better than you. But overall, you know, my approach for that in high school or in middle school, and pretty much up until like college, was just like work harder than everybody else, work harder than everybody else, right? And that got me pretty far. It definitely like instilled discipline within me, because I not these days I just naturally have the drive to work harder than other people because of this experience. But when I got to college and my interests started changing, and I was doing other things, I was learning guitar, I was learning how to produce music, I was into esports, so I was gaming, and I was learning so many things. I was learning so many different things at the same time, and I still felt like there has to be more to the formula. There has to be a little bit more to the formula than just working harder than everybody else. Because truth be told, you don't know how hard everybody else is working. So you can work as hard as possible, but like at the end of the day, there's probably still somebody working harder than you. So it's like working hard. I was like, that can't be the only piece of the puzzle, because there's people that I work harder than, or that it appears in my perception that I work harder than, that are still outdoing me. So what's really going on? So that's when I started researching how to actually learn skills. I think my first Google search was, why do I learn so slow? Right? But I wanted, and at not only did I want to learn a lot of different things, I wanted to be great. I wanted to be top of the line, world class at all of them. So, and I still feel that way today. So I'm going to be breaking down pretty much everything I have learned and am continuing to learn about how to learn. And this research comes from books. So the first book that I read on this topic was The Little Book of Talent and the Talent Code, both by the same author. His name is Daniel something. The Talent Code by Daniel something. I don't remember his last name. Maybe I'll link it in the description. But he wrote both of those books. The Talent Code is based off of is like the science, the hard research, the experiments, all of that. And then the Little Book of Talent is basically easily digestible steps to learn faster that was gained from that research, right? So, and another resource is Andrew Huberman's podcast on learning skills faster. So that's going to be, that's pretty much where I'm getting all my information from. But this is part one of this video. Definitely going to be putting out multiple parts of this video because there's so much information on this topic. And I've been applying a lot of these things too, and they work. I will definitely say they work. I no longer identify as a slow learner. I feel like I pick up things pretty quickly now, but also I still know that I can grow, and I still know that I can do better. And hopefully with this video, you'll be able to as well. So the first thing we need to know is the difference between open and closed skills, or open loop skills and closed loop skills. So open loop skills are essentially the more straightforward skills. Like the more you do it and you know immediately whether you did it right or you did it wrong. So this could be like throwing a dart at a dartboard. You immediately see, okay, did you hit the dartboard at all? Did you hit the bullseye? Where you landed, you can immediately get that feedback as to how to move forward. Serving, practicing your serve in tennis is another good example of an open loop skill. And so in tennis, like the serve can only go on a specific part of the court. So if it goes past that or it doesn't reach that point, like that little box area, if you play tennis, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't worry about it. It's not that important. But the concept to drive home is anything that has a specific goal, like a very specific goal that is the same thing, like making a free throw or getting the serve to the right point. That is an open loop skill. Now, a closed loop skill are more of the free flowing skills, more of the skills that give you consistent feedback as you're going. So like if you're a runner and you're working on your form, this is something that you're going to be tweaking for the entirety of your run. If you're a dancer and you're working on your frame, this is going to be something that you're tweaking the whole dance session. If you're a musician and you're working on rhythm or improvising, this is a closed loop skill. You're getting continuous feedback the whole time, and you're kind of monitoring that as you go. And the reason why we need to know the difference between open loop and closed loop skills is because acquiring them and practicing them are two different processes. And we'll get more into that probably maybe in part 2 or further in this video. I'm not sure, but that's the whole reason why we need to know. We need to know the differences of these skills anyway. Another example of a closed loop skill would be dribbling a basketball in a game. Because in a basketball game, you're getting defended. You have a defender. You have somebody who's trying to take the ball from you. You have people that you might need to pass to, and the variables are constantly changing. So you're constantly changing the way that you move and you dribble. So closed loop skill. So we also have 3 components of a skill, right? So the first component is sensory perception, and that's like what our senses are perceiving while we're practicing. Then the motor movements themselves, the fact that I'm actually putting my fingers down to press the keys on the keyboard, like the actual movement, right? And then proprioception, which was a word that took me a good bit amount of time to understand what this word meant. But proprioception is basically where our limbs are in relation to the body. So proprioception is something that happens subconsciously. So when you're walking, right, you're not really thinking about how, unless you're, going through physical therapy or something. But most of the time when you're walking, you're not thinking about, oh, I need to extend my leg this way and I need to bend my knee like this. I need to place it on the ground at the perfect distance. Like, we're not thinking about that. Like, our proprioception is taking care of that. But the moment I decide to focus on the way that I walk, maybe I want to walk differently. Maybe I'm doing a dance move. now I'm focusing on that proprioception, if that makes sense. So those are the three components of learning a skill. So like I said, sensory perception, the action itself, proprioception, our where the limbs are in relation to the body and our perception of that. So when we sit down to practice, this is where things really start to get, well, all of this has been important, but this is where the process starts, right? All of that before was pretty much what we need to know in order to start the process of learning efficiently. Now the process begins to when I sit down to practice keyboard after this video, there's questions that we need to ask ourselves before we just jump in. Not only is this bringing more awareness to our practice, but it's allowing us to really learn in the most efficient way. And the first question to ask ourselves is it an open loop skill or a closed loop skill? Am I practicing something where I get the feedback immediately, or am I practicing something more fluid, like interpretation or dribbling a basketball or something like that? Because as we move forward, you're gonna find out why it's important to know that, because we practice those things in completely different ways. We practice those two skills in completely different ways. The second question that we want to ask ourselves: what should I focus on? Am I focusing on, because there's a bunch of things you can focus on when you practice. If you're practicing, if you feel like you've been doing something for a long time and you're still not that good at it, 9 times out of 10, it's the way that you're practicing. I feel like that other 1 time out of 10, it's that we have unrealistic expectations for growth, but that's a whole nother concept. A lot of people sometimes sit down and they mindlessly practice. They mindlessly repeat the same thing over and over. But asking yourself what exactly you're going to focus on in this practice session is paramount. Are you going to focus on the outcome? Are you going to focus on playing the notes right? Or are you going to focus on making the free throws? Or are you going to focus on your form? See, if you're focused on your form, then you don't get upset when you don't make a free throw, because you're focusing on form today, or you're focusing on form with this practice session. You know what I'm saying? So when I sit down to practice piano, I think, okay, am I learning a song? Like, am I learning the right notes to play, an open loop skill? Or am I practicing how to emotionally convey the piece, a closed loop skill? Daniel, I think Coyle is his name, who wrote The Little Book of Talent and The Talent Code. He defines these as hard and soft skills, hard being the open loop skills and soft being the closed loop skills. And so what are you focused on? Are you focused on the outcome? Are you focused on your sensory perception, which is one of the 3 components of a skill? Your sensory perception being what you see, what you hear, what you're doing, you know? So are you gonna, like, if you're practicing your free throws, are you gonna practice on locking your eyes at the net or at the rim? Like, I'm not a shooting coach, but I've heard that you're supposed to lock your eyes exactly where you want the ball to go, which is literally the hole of the rim. And so, are we focused on that? Are we focused on proprioception? Do we focus in on the proprioception? Are we focusing on, even though when we hold the ball, when we get to a certain level in basketball or in music, when we hold our instrument, it becomes second nature. or how we're sitting becomes second nature. But are we going to focus more on our posture? Are we going to focus more on exactly what our fingers are doing? I posted a video in one of the piano groups that I'm in, and one of the pieces of feedback that I got was sit higher, because your elbows, if your hands are below your elbows, you get more range of motion and you get more freedom in your hands. I didn't know that, but that's appropriate. That's focusing on proprioception, focusing on something that was initially subconscious that I was doing, which was just sitting down. But now I have to focus on the way that I sit. So those are two questions that we want to ask ourselves before we sit down to practice. Is it an open or closed loop skill? What should we focus on? What component of the motor skills are we going to focus on? What component, or what are we going to focus on? Proprioception, different things like that. Or what component of the practice are we going to focus on? So there's this, you've probably heard it before, there's this rule, I think it's called the 10,000 hours rule. And it's that it takes 10,000 hours to master anything. And that's the baseline of what it's about. But Andrew Huberman, and I kind of am inclined to agree, regards it as a myth, because the issue with the 10,000 hours rule is that science and biology speak a different story. So basically, what I digested from his podcast is that when learning a new skill, you want to perform as many repetitions per unit time as possible. So it's not about the time that you put in, but it's about the repetitions that you put in said time. So it's like, yes, technically you need a lot of time to perform a lot of repetitions, but the opposite is not true. Just because you have a lot of time doesn't mean you're performing a lot of repetitions. And what do I mean by repetitions? Repetitions isn't just doing the thing over and over. So the concept that this is trying to drive home is that it's the amount of reps, it's the amount of quality reps in a unit of time. So quality reps means correct reps, and it also means incorrect reps. It also means errors. And this is the part that I feel like gets most people, is that when we make errors, we feel like shit about it when we're practicing. We get annoyed, like people down talk, people have negative self-talk when they make errors. But the funny thing about errors is errors are scientifically proven to literally be like, not just Andrew Huberman said this. It was also in the Little Book of Talent and the Talent Code, is that errors, they do something. So it's kind of like when you burn yourself. Chances are you're not going to do it again because you learned that it's hot, right? So the brain is hypersensitive to errors. So errors cue the nervous system to error correction. So it cues the nervous system to go into error correction mode, which is a form of hyperfocus. And it basically opens the door for what is called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is, by the book definition, is the brain and the nervous system's ability to change in response to experience. So errors cue the nervous system to error correction error correction, and opens the door for neuroplasticity, the brain and the nervous system's ability to change in response to the experience. What does that sound like? The ability to change in response to experience. That's learning. Your brain does not go into learning mode unless it's making mistakes. Without errors, the brain is not in position to change. So it's not just about repetitions, doing it right over and over. It's also about doing it wrong a good amount of times as well. And obviously it doesn't mean doing it wrong on purpose, but it means that the amount of times that you make a mistake, the amount of times that you mess up are actually super important to learning. And there was also one part of the podcast that was actually saying like speeding up your practice to initiate more errors is actually not like a bad thing. A lot of people say like, oh, when you're messing up, slow down so you can get it right. And that's good at a certain point of the practice, but eventually you do want to push your limits and start speeding it up so you can mess up more, so that you can open the door for more neuroplasticity. So after being hypersensitive to errors, when your brain performs the action correctly, it literally rewards you. It rewards the brain neurochemically, aka like neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin. You feel mad good when like it's just a satisfying, pleasing feeling, and you might not even notice this feeling, but that's the feeling that drives us to keep learning the thing that we're learning. So it's like when we make an error, it's setting up the body to reward itself when you do it right. And then you're going to keep seeking that feeling of doing it right. Then once we can do it correct, we do it correct as many times as possible while messing up a few times as well. You know, it's just going to happen naturally. And then now we're learning. But the thing is, we're hyper focused on this process while it's happening. And that's what's going to speed up our learning more efficiently, rather than just like banging our head on the keyboard or on whatever it is that we're trying to learn. And now I'm going to close this video or this part one with one tip that you probably didn't know, that I didn't know, that I just learned myself. And basically after we finish this learning process, after you're done practicing keyboard, done at your dance lesson, it is actually scientifically studied and proven that a post-learning idle time actually aids in the quickness at which we retain what we just learned. And I called it, like I kind of just called it something because Andrew Huberman didn't really have a word for it, but I called it post-learning meditation, PLM for short. But post-learning meditation is basically after your session, after you're done practicing, after you're done learning, close your eyes and do nothing for 1 to 10 minutes. And that means you're not getting on your phone. You're not going to play a video game. You're not like some people will like go from, one class to the next, go from dance class to music class. And another reason why like the school system's format isn't really that great, but we all know that already. So during this time that you're closed, your eyes are closed and you're doing absolutely nothing for 1 to 10 minutes, the brain is automatically replaying everything that it just learned. It's just like a replay going in your head, and it's also deleting the files of the ones that you did wrong. It's like, oh, okay, this one was wrong, delete. Oh, this one was wrong, delete. And it's literally doing that and it does this in your sleep too, which is why getting quality sleep is super important when it comes up to learning skill acquisition. But when we do this right after a session, it aids in even quicker, even faster learning than waiting till the nighttime to get the sleep in, because we're doing it right after our practice session. So once you're done practicing, practice PLM, post learning meditation. Do nothing for 1 to 10, even 1 minute is helpful. 1 to 10 minutes, close your eyes, focus on your breath. Just don't do anything. And your brain, you might not even, it's not a conscious thing. Don't try to do it. Like, don't try to close your eyes and visualize the time that you've done it right. Visualization is another practice method that is separate from this. In this specifically, PLM, you are closing your eyes and you're essentially resting consciously. Or you're resting. I won't say consciously, but you're resting. Just close your eyes. And but closing your eyes is important, because if you're letting in other sensory input, then it's not going to be as effective, which is why I feel like closing your eyes is important. But that is what you do at the end of every single learning session. And it's funny because a lot of people don't know these things, and we wonder why, like, it's hard for us. It feels hard for us to learn. I mean, learning is hard in general. Like, it takes time. So that's a thing. But, we all want to be great at what we do. I'm sure we all want to be great at multiple things. So putting the time in to research what exactly is helping us, or what exactly is going to help us on this journey, what exactly is going to help us learn quicker, I feel like it's very important. And I hope this video did just that for you. See you in the next one. And yeah.